folks, ThriceRisen here. Why am I wearing a top hat? Because it's Top Hat Thursday and I say so. I'm here to talk with you about a deck that has done well for me, both in views on this channel and in actual play. What deck is that? That deck is this one. For those of you without X-ray vision, this deck is my Meren of Clan Nel Toth commander deck. And some of you may have seen a video that I posted some time ago where I was breaking the deck down and talking about it. Well, I realized that all of my old deck tech videos are pretty much completely outdated. So it is high time to start doing some new deck tech videos using the tech of my decks that I am technically decking at this time. So, without further ado, let's talk about Meren of Clan Nel Toth. So here you have the lovely lady herself trying to get a non-glare angle. There we go. So, Meren of Clan Nel Toth, for those of you who aren't in the know, is a legendary creature, human shaman, for 2 a green and a black. And whenever another creature you control dies, you get an experience counter. These experience counters exist outside the game. I think they technically exist in the command zone, but they might as well exist in the top of this hat for all that any other player can do about them. The only other thing that really can affect them is proliferate, because players technically have the experience counters on them, so if you have a proliferate effect, it can raise those experience counters. I don't have anything that cares about that in this deck, but Meren is really good. So what do you do with these experience counters? Well, Meren does something really cool with them. She says, at the beginning of your end step, choose target creature card in your graveyard. If that card's converted mana cost is less than or equal to the number of experience counters you have, return it to the battlefield. Otherwise, put it into your hand. This ability is phenomenal. If you play her on turn 4, if you've had anything die, you're going to get a creature back to your hand at your end step. So you could play her past the turn and her trigger will go on the stack. Now it is a trigger. It does say at the beginning of your end step. Triggers use the words at, whenever, or when. If something says as, it is not a trigger. Pretty sure that applies in most situations. That's a pretty hard and fast rule when it comes to Magic. One of the things I love about Magic is it's very linguistically consistent, at least in their modern usage. So, at the beginning of your end step, you get a trigger that lets you choose target creature card in your graveyard. So you can't steal anyone's creatures. This card would be even more amazing if you could do that, but you are limited to whatever is in your own yard of the grave. So, why is this card so good? Because if you can get your experience counters up quickly, you can start reanimating creatures directly to the battlefield that are way above your normal mana curve at the time. For example, if you have creatures that sacrifice themselves, like Sakura Tribe Elder, or Caustic Caterpillar, or even Viscera Seer, or the Mighty Spore Frog, I'll get to that in a little bit, but these creatures can help you artificially raise your experience counters very, very quickly. For example, take Sakura Tribe Elder. Let's find him in the deck while I'm talking so I can talk to you about him. Sakura Tribe Elder is a 2 mana creature, and he's really, really phenomenal. He belongs in quite a lot of commander decks. Any deck that's running green, you need to seriously consider running the most elderly of the Sakura Tribe in your deck. And at the moment, my Sakura Tribe Elder is hiding somewhere in the bowels of this deck. He doesn't want to come out. There we go. Sakura Tribe Elder. Here he is. So, 1 and a green for a 1/1 Snake Shaman. Sacrifice Sakura Tribe Elder, search your library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Sacrificing him is paying a cost, So he's already dead by the time his ability goes on the stack. Now, people could stifle that ability, but are they going to really stop you from getting a tapped basic land? Maybe. It'd be an interesting situation if that was the case. Or maybe they're just particularly spiteful against snake shamans. But anyway, Sakura Tribe Elder, you play him on turn 2. You drop Meren on turn 4, maybe 3 if you've ramped a little bit. You sacrifice the Sakura Tribe Elder. At your end step, Meren targets him. He returns to your hand. Because you have 1 experience counter, he costs 2. Okay, that's fine. Next turn, you play Sakura Tribe Elder. You sacrifice him immediately, go get another land. Then at the end step, you have 2 experience counters, and you can now reanimate him directly to play, and then every turn, even if your deck doesn't do anything else, you can just start getting all the basic lands out of your deck and accelerating your mana curve tremendously. The same applies for another fun creature, Caustic Caterpillar. There's all kinds of fun stuff, but let's look at the deck. So what we have here, I'm just going to go through the cards briefly and show you what's in the deck currently. We have Green Sun Zenith. It's a sorcery for a green and X. Search your library for a green creature card with converted mana cost X or less. Put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Shuffle Green Sun Zenith into its owner's library. It only can find a green creature, and it can only find a green creature that is of a mana cost of whatever you paid for this. So you have to pay 1 extra to go find a creature in your deck and put it into play. Why is this card good? Because most of the time I'm going to be firing off this for X equals 1, or maybe 2, because this is going to go find the all-star of the deck, Spore Frog, which I'll explain when we get to him. So Green Sun Zenith is good. It finds lots of your cheap, recurable sacrifice creatures. So that's Sakura Tribe Elder, that's Green Sun Zenith. Skull Clamp, another way to make your stuff die and get you lots of cards. This deck actually can draw a frightening amount of cards if it assembles itself correctly. Forest, I'm sure at this point, I would assume you know what this card does. Taps for green mana. Filth. Filth has been in the deck. I haven't won with Filth in a long time. I haven't needed to, but he's an extra insurance. What he does, he has Swamp Walk. As long as he is in your graveyard and you control a swamp, creatures you control have Swamp Walk. Why is Filth good? I mean, you could only hurt other black mana people, right? Well, not if you have Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. This turns all lands into swamps in addition to the other types, so in conjunction, it just says your creatures are unblockable. So those two together work really well. Now, if you have creatures die, and you don't have enough experience counters to reanimate them, but maybe you want them now anyway, enter Animate Dead. 2 mana, reanimate something. This is really good if you have cards in the deck, which I do, like Gaia Reach Sanitarium. So if you have ways to discard cards, then you can reanimate them for much less than their normal mana cost. This card will usually hit something like a really big threat, like Runescarred Demon or Terastodon. Speaking of reanimation, Beacon of Unrest. It shuffles itself back into your library, it reanimates a creature, either yours or someone else's. It can also get an artifact if you need an artifact that someone has in the graveyard. More forests. Speaking of artifacts in graveyard, Solemn Simulacrum. A great card. It does stuff when it comes in, and it does stuff when it dies, which means if you're looping it with Meren, value. Swamps. Very important. This deck needs them. Swamps. Victimize. Another way to make something die and reanimate things that died before. Start that bicycle, friends. Seagate Wreckage, I put in here, I'm testing it out at the moment. What it does is you can pay 2 and a colorless and tap it to draw a card. You can only activate this ability if you have no cards in hand. So if I've played out my hand and maybe someone wipes the board clean and I'm left with very little action, this can help me maybe draw into something. Again, I'm not 100% on that card. I'm testing it out at the moment to see if it can help me in those scrapes. Speaking of scrapes, your permanents are now irrelevant. Yes, that's right. Terastodon is coming for your lands and or your artifacts. He'll give you elephants, though. Speaking of coming for your lands, Ghost Quarter. It's always good to have something that answers a troublesome land. What is not a troubling land is Evolving Wilds. People aren't usually going to stop that. Sudden Spoiling stops pretty much everything, from a Deadeye Peregrine Drake combo to a giant ball of angry aggro coming at your face. Sudden Spoiling is your card to shut them down. Any black deck, in my opinion, should be running Sudden Spoiling. Slum Reaper is part of a soft lock that the deck can assemble. If I sacrifice this and keep reanimating it, that's 2 creatures a turn, sometimes more depending upon the situation, and it keeps people out of their creature state. Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, have a lot of permanence, get a lot of devotion. I figure I should reward myself for that. More swamps. If you're talking about a deck that uses the graveyard, you're going to be using Eternal Witness. Eternal Witness is one of my favorite cards in Magic, right up there with Wormcoil Engine. This card is the best graveyard recursion in Magic, in my opinion. It's just so good. Now, in Commander, you can only have one of any card other than basic land, sadly, so I can't load the deck full of Eternal Witnesses. But what I can take is a Green Warden of Marasa. Eternal Witness when it comes in, Eternal Witness when it dies, if you want to. You might just let it go to the graveyard, reanimate, and get further value out of it. It's also a 5/4, which is a pretty good sized body. Speaking of Gaia Reach Sanitarium, everyone draws, everyone discards, it's a great time, excepting I'm running Reanimator. Let's have a look at one of the key cards for any graveyard deck, Gerard's Orders. Search your library for up to 2 creature cards and reveal them, put one into your hand and the other into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. If you are playing against a graveyard deck like Meren, this is a card you might not want to let resolve because it can get stuff out of hand very quickly. Another really important card is Buried Alive, which we'll talk about when I find it. Burnished Heart. When it dies, I get land, and then I can reanimate it and get more land. This deck has a land sub-theme, in case you haven't noticed. Speaking of killing lots of things, Fallen Ideal is a way to get a quick commander kill. You enchant a creature, you enchant Meren. Enchanted creature has flying, and has the ability to sacrifice a creature to give itself +2/+1 until end of turn. And when Fallen Ideal is put into a graveyard from play, return Fallen Ideal to its owner's hand. So if Meren dies, this comes back. It reanimates itself! It's awesome. And if you sack, let's see, Meren is a 3-power. This can give +2/+1. So you need to sacrifice 10 creatures, maybe? So yeah, 10, 20, 9, 10 creatures. Not really thinking too hard on the math. 9 or 10 creatures to get Meren into lethal commander range with flying. So, really good. High Market, it's a land that sacrifices a creature. Pretty good. Disciple of Bolas, it's a card that sacrifices a creature to get you more cards. This deck likes getting cards. Speaking of getting cards, nothing does it better than Sidisi Undead Vizier. It enters, sacrifices itself, gets a card. Meren reanimates it, it sacrifices itself and gets more cards, and I just keep tutoring through the deck. What am I tutoring for? Not Westvale Abbey. It's kind of in there just because I might need a giant beat stick, but... Armillary Sphere, recent addition, because I'm trying to speed up the speed with which this deck speeds out its mana. Because it's not a creature, so I was loath to include it, but it's just too good. This card is so good! Include it in your decks. Forest. Buried Alive, another card that you need to be scared of from graveyard decks. Search your library for up to 3 creature cards and put them into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. AKA, give your graveyard deck some business. It will get business. Like Merciless Executioner, another thing that makes people sacrifice creatures. The Amphibian, the Legend, Spore Frog. Anyone who's played against my Meren deck hates this card with a passion, because Spore Frog, in a 1v1 match, says this game is over. Sacrifice Spore Frog, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. So unless my opponent is on some kind of non-combat damage combo deck, I have all the time in the world, because it dies. I get unexperienced counter. Meren reanimates this directly to the battlefield at the end step. So as long as I have Meren and a Spore Frog, I have nothing but time. So it's very hard to get rid of, because if you try to target it, I can sacrifice it in response. And the only way to get it is to make me sack it, and then you have to blow up my graveyard. You have to bomb my yard to get it gone. And the deck does have some insurance against those strategies because I use the graveyard so heavily. Caustic Caterpillar, as I mentioned before, artifact or enchantment destruction on a stick. Great for early games against an artifact or equipment deck. It can lock them out of their strategy very aggressively. And if you have a problematic equipment deck at your table that is very fast and aggressive, the other players might just let you keep getting away with blowing up that person's artifacts. Sure, he's helping us, but you're accruing experience counters at the same time. Swamp. Liliana, Heretical Healer. Profits off of death, and the ultimate of her Planeswalker side says you get an emblem that says, whenever a creature dies, return it to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. A creature, not yours, everyone's. All of your creatures are mine. And it's really nasty if you have, any of the Fleshbag Marauder type effects, because they just start cycling every end step. Overgrown Tomb. It's a Swamp Forest. Sylvan Scrying to go get the cool lands that are in the deck. Nissa Vastwood Seer. She exists because she is a creature that gets a land, and she turns into a Planeswalker. I never ever use her other abilities other than her +1, which lets me draw a card or put a land into play. She is card advantage. Dread Return might be card disadvantage, but it reanimates stuff and makes stuff die at the same time. It's phenomenal. Mitotic Slime, we'll talk about him later. Swamp Forest. Blighted Woodland, another cool land that lets you get more land. It's good in most green decks if you don't have access to a more expensive ramp, and even then it's still really good. Volrath's Stronghold. I don't use it that often anymore, but it's still really handy in a pinch. There was one time I had my library pretty much exiled, and this kept throwing stuff from my graveyard back on top of my library so I didn't mill out and die. So it can be weirdly situationally good. Entomb, the turn 1 play that you hope to have. Throw a creature or any card into the graveyard at instant speed. It's phenomenal. Thunderfoot Baloth, whenever I get a pile of tokens or anything else, make them big and swing. Dictate of Erebos. Whenever a creature I control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. Similar to Grave Pact, I don't own a Grave Pact for this deck. I should. I really should, but I just haven't gotten around to getting one yet. Viscera Seer. It lets you sacrifice a creature to scry 1, and you can sacrifice itself. I've used this as a safety valve. If someone is exiling all creatures, I say, nope, sack them. Throw them into my graveyard. Get a pile of experience counters. Haha. It's good stuff. Field of Ruin, a really good land destruction. Yes, you have to pay 2 for it, but everyone gets a basic, so people let you get away with it. Runescarred Demon, tutor on a stick, big giant thing that you can take advantage of all your experience counters to reanimate. Expedition Map goes and gets cool lands. It's good stuff. Grave Titan, we'll talk about him later. Rishkar's Expertise, I'm not 100% on this card, much less about the little cool Star City stamp on there. But it draws a bunch of cards, but I think there might be better things in the deck. Now, one card that's absolutely phenomenal is Crows and Grip. Any green deck should be running Crows and Grip. Split second, destroy target artifact or enchantment. So many decks just lose outright to a Crows and Grip at a well-timed interval that it needs to be included. Acidic Slime, really great. I've used it most recently on someone's Rogue's Passage that they were using to beat me in the face with their commander. It's a good card. Blows stuff up. Terramorphic Expanse, it gets land. Wayfarer's Bauble, it gets land. Finding more land. Hey look, it's a thing that gets land. Yavimaya Altar, noticing a theme, sub-theme perhaps. Land gets. This deck likes doing it. And likes killing things to do it. Uvenwald Hydra, it's big, and it gets land. Sifter of Skulls, it doesn't get land, but it makes mana when things die, so it's alright. It's a more expensive Pawn of Ulamog, another card that I keep meaning to get for the deck and forgetting to. Grey Merchant of Asphodel kills people, especially when you start reanimating it. It's kind of rude. Skullwinder, another E-Witness that gives someone something back, but you ideally pick someone who doesn't have a graveyard that's profitable. Dark Petition, it tutors, finds stuff. Natural Order, I usually stack whatever green thing I have and go find a Spore Frog. Felden's Cane, an emergency safety valve for this deck. Instant speed, exile this, put my graveyard back into my deck. If someone tries to bomb my graveyard, I usually try to be prepared. Beast Within, general purpose permanent removal is highly underrated in Commander. I think you should be, in my opinion, people should be gearing the removal less towards creature or artifact or enchantment and just things that can hit everything, or as many things as possible. Primal Command, another way to shuffle the graveyard, not at instant speed, but it's still good, and it lets me tutor for stuff. Life from the Loam lets me get cool lands back. It also lets me dredge, but I haven't really used it. It hasn't turned up yet. I've had it in the deck for some time, but it hasn't shown up in a hand or been relevant. Brutalizer Exarch. It is really good at dealing with things that the deck can't deal with very effectively otherwise, like a pesky Planeswalker or a Dark Steel Forge. Tuck it under the bottom of their library, just get it out of here. Bajuka Bog for the other graveyard decks. It's really good. Reclamation Sage, my buddy Raph Reanimated, preached the gospel of this card to me the hard way by blowing up all my stuff, and now I run it all the time. Another Fleshbag Marauder, or the actual Fleshbag Marauder in addition to the other two. Putrefy, another great instant speed removal that can hit multiple permanent types. Woodland Bellower, it's 6 mana that says go find a Spore Frog. Or if you've got it already, an Eternal Witness or any of the other value small creatures in the deck. Phyrexian Delver reanimates creatures. Alright, now we get to the nifty win package of the deck. Oh, as I mentioned before, Cabal Coffers with Urborg. Mana. So great. So how does the deck win other than just extreme value? Well, it produces lots of tokens. We have Grave Titan, who's just a phenomenal token producer. Abhorrent Overlord, which produces evasive tokens. Avenger of Zendikar, which produces a lot of tokens and they can get really big. Mitotic Slime, which produces splitting tokens and it's kind of neat. And Wormcoil Engine, yes, my pretty one. Which is, again, one of my favorite cards in all of Magic. So, it makes lots of tokens. What does it do with them? Well, the thing is, I'm usually not satisfied with just doing the basic thing in Magic. Anyone who plays against me likes to know that I'm a Johnny combo player who likes to combo off in a very Timmy way. I like to combo off big. So this deck is not a combo deck, it's a synergy deck, but the synergy accidentally goes infinite with these two cards. Ashnod's Altar says you can sacrifice a creature to add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. Nim Deathmantle says equipped creature, it's an equipment, gets +2/+2, has Intimidate, and is a black zombie. That's irrelevant, because its second ability says whenever a non-token creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay 4 mana. If you do, return that card to the battlefield and attach Nim Deathmantle to it. You may have noticed all the token producers that I mentioned just a minute ago produce at least 2 tokens, either by entering the battlefield or by leaving it. So what you do is you put these into play. You then put one of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different token producers into play, and then you sacrifice one of them. With the trigger of reanimation on the stack, you sacrifice 2 of the tokens, or 1 of the tokens, rather. So you can go about this in 2 ways. Do you want mana or do you want tokens? If you want mana, you sacrifice both tokens to the Ashnod's Altar. You sacrifice the original creature to the Ashnod's Altar anyway. And if you want mana, you sacrifice everything. Then what you do is you reanimate the creature, you get more tokens, and you repeat. If you want tokens, then you leave one of the tokens alive and just keep repeating it, not gaining any mana. So, at the end of it, you'll be left with infinite colorless mana and infinite tokens. Sadly, I don't really have anything to do with infinite colorless mana. But what can be done is, depending upon what you do with the mana itself, you can do some really interesting other things. Because once you have infinite colorless mana, you stop sacrificing the token producer. You start sacrificing something like Sidisi, or Runescarred Demon, or Solemn Simulacrum. Get all the land out of your deck. Tutor for any card in your deck as many times as you want. Draw a bunch of cards, because you can play Solemn Simulacrum, sacrifice it with its draw trigger on the stack the trigger of the reanimation so the reanimation resolves first, reanimate it, get a land, then sack it, and just keep stacking up draw triggers, so you get all the land out of your deck, then draw all the cards, so you draw nothing but gas. That's the gist of this deck at the moment, and it plays really well. I haven't played it a lot frequently because I've been focusing on another, more competitive deck, which I will detail in another video. But Meren is one of my favorite commanders. She's just so good. I love the art, I love the flavor of the card. I am a Golgari mage at heart. So it's actually partly why I have kitted her out the way I have, because black sleeves, green box, Golgari, all the way. It's my favorite of the Guild 2-color colors, and I'll be playing it until I stop playing Magic, which hopefully is a long way from now. So there you have it, the updated Meren of Clan Nel Toth EDH deck. I'm ThriceRisen. Thanks for watching.